All right, well, we're just going to get right into this, so we can't seem to get through this without laughing. Stillman Smith Jr. for the Unapologetic Apologists, and today, speaking on behalf of Prager University as a member of Prager Force. And earlier today, I had an awesome opportunity. I got to interview one of the great intellectual minds of apologetics, Dr. Frank Turek. He's been a huge influence on me and why I'm doing this. And you can go check out the full interview. I wanted to just upload a couple clips. And so in this clip, we actually got to talk about his book, Legislating Morality. And we got into the issue of abortion. And we had a lot of things we had to cover in a short amount of time, so we didn't get to go as in-depth into all the topics as we would have liked. But real quick before I show you that, I wanted to read this thing. Things make the rounds on Facebook and Twitter. And there's one thing, I'm going to read this. It says, abortion is not killing a baby. Abortions are only performed up until viability, before a fetus can survive outside of the womb. Fetuses are quite literally part of the woman's body because they cannot exist separate from her. No one is throwing a full-term baby in the trash. Okay, that's actually nonsense. First of all, people will tell you all the time that there are state limits to the term when babies can be aborted. Just go look that up yourself. Do some research for yourself. Those laws are violated all the time. There are late-term abortions. They take place all the time. These laws are not obeyed. But secondly, says literally a part of the woman's body because they can't exist separate from her. This argument, this does not hold water, okay? The woman does not have two hands. She doesn't have yes, she does have two hands. She doesn't have four hands, okay? She doesn't have 4 feet. She doesn't have 2 heads, okay? That this is a separate life within her. That, yeah, it does need her to live, but it's a separate being within her. And as far as this idea of abortions are only performed up till the point of viability, that's completely arbitrary, okay? The point of viability literally depends on what part of the world you live in, because technology is constantly pushing that line back further and further. But anyway, please enjoy this clip of Frank Turek and I talking about his book Legislating Morality and whether we even can legislate morality. I just read this over the weekend, finally, the book Legislating Morality.
That's the first book, yeah, 20 years old.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely excellent. So I guess just before we talk about specific things into it, because, you know, the title alone would raise controversy. Some people would say, Frank, you know, you can't legislate morality. You've got your morals, I've got mine. You might be for, you know, heterosexual marriage, I'm for same-sex marriage. And so morality is really, really relative. You can't legislate your religion on me. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I'd say, what do you mean by morality, right? And secondly, can you think of a law that doesn't legislate morality, right? And every law tries to declare one behavior right and the opposite wrong. The question isn't whether or not you can legislate morality. The question is, whose morality will we legislate? Let's take one of the most controversial issues out there, and that's the issue of abortion. Everybody is trying to legislate morality. Everybody thinks somebody has a moral right. Like, for example, the pro-abortion people think a woman has a moral right to choose what she does with her own body, and apparently to also has a moral right to kill the life in her, because it's not even up for debate now. We know what's inside a human being.
Absolutely.
Or inside a pregnant woman. It's a human being. It's not a squirrel. It's not a giraffe. It's not a mouse. You know, it's a human being. We know that. Genetically, we know that. But that's a moral position to say, I have a moral right to do what I want with my own body, even if it means killing another person. Okay? That's a moral position.
Absolutely.
Well, the other side has a moral position, too, that people think that life is sacred, that the right to life is the right to all other rights. Everybody's trying to impose morality. The pro-life people are trying to impose continued pregnancy on the mother, and the pro-abortion people are trying to impose death on the baby. Abortion's chosen. Both are moral positions. The only question is, which moral position ought to be imposed? And I think the right to life is the right to all other rights. Does a woman have a right to do what she wants with her own body? Yeah, generally, but not if she kills somebody else in the process, right?
Yeah, I don't think that argument holds water anyway. Anyway, does the woman have 4 hands? Does she have 4 feet? Does she have 2 hearts, 2 heads? At some point, you have to recognize that there's a separate life within her.
Of course there is, but people don't want to. They don't. What they do now is, instead of arguing it's not a life, they argue it's not a person. It's an arbitrary distinction. They say it's not a person. Well, once you start declaring human beings not persons, where's that going to end, right? I
Right.
mean, the Hitler can declare the Jews not persons. The Supreme Court can declare blacks not persons, which they did in Dred Scott in 1857, right? They
Hmm.
said blacks are only 3/5 of a person. Once
Yeah.
you start making these arbitrary decisions about personhood, rather than the genetic fact that you have a human being in the womb, once you start calling them persons or non-persons, then where does it end? You can just declare anybody a non-person and kill them and say, well, they didn't have a right to life.
Yeah. Well, it seems one of the big disagreements here is it's what you just said. You said we ought not legislate your morality or my morality. Well, we ought legislate the morality. And I think one of the things we see coming from the politically left is they want to legislate their morality.
Yes.
You've talked about on your show before where does the moral compass point? Does the moral compass point to a standard outside of us, or does it just point to us? And I think a lot of people on the left, they say, well, it points to whatever we want.
Well, if it points to whatever we want, then it's not really a right, then it's just a preference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the problems I have with people who are atheists, who are in the public square trying to say, well, I have a right to this and I have a right to that. Well, look, if atheism is true, nobody has a right to anything.
Yeah.
We're just molecular machines anyway. There's no value to human life. There's no purpose to life, so there's no right or wrong way to live it.
Mm-hmm.
I give the analogy. I say, why is it that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? And the answer is because you know what the purpose of the game is.
Yeah.
Right? If there was no purpose to the game, you wouldn't know that a touchdown was better than an interception for your quarterback. But the only reason you know a touchdown is better because you know the goal of the game. Same thing is true when it comes to morality. You can't know that a particular behavior is right or wrong unless you know the purpose of the game, the purpose of life. If there's no purpose to life, if we just all die and that's it, there's no afterlife, there's no ultimate meaning, then you can't say that anything is right or wrong.
Right.
Whether natural marriage, same-sex marriage, life, abortion, it doesn't. There's no goal. There's no purpose to life, so it doesn't matter. But we all know there are certain rights and certain wrongs, and there is a purpose to life. To know God and to make him known is the ultimate purpose. And when we take somebody's life, we are taking somebody who's made in the likeness and image of God. We don't have the authority to do that to an innocent person. God does, because he's the creator of life. He can resurrect it, but we don't have that right.
Absolutely.
So, and let me go back to something you said earlier, too. When people say, don't impose your morality on me, I always say, why not? Would that be immoral?
Yeah.
And by the way, you're doing the same thing you're claiming I ought not do. You're saying you ought not impose ought nots, yet you're imposing your ought not on me. You're saying I can't do what you're doing right now. But the better answer is this. This isn't my morality. Look, I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that theft is wrong, that murder is wrong, that rape is wrong, that abortion is wrong. I didn't make any of this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that men were made for women and women were made for men. And the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize that man-woman relationship over every other sexual relationship. I didn't make any of this up. This isn't my morality. This is the morality. This is the one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. This is the one the Apostle Paul said, even the Gentiles are not of the law written on their hearts. He says this in Romans chapter 2. In other words, you don't even need religion. You don't need the Bible to know any of this. Everybody knows it anyway, and it's grounded in God's nature. We know it, that's epistemology, but it's grounded in God's nature, that's ontology, and that's why Jefferson said it's self-evident, because it's grounded in our Creator. So I'm not trying to legislate my morality, I'm trying to legislate the morality. And if you don't like the morality, you don't really have a problem with me. You have a problem with the Creator whose nature has set it up this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can actually go two different directions. I want to see if I can touch on both of those real quick. One is, of course, is Trump's wall. That's a big issue. You just talked about on your podcast a little bit ago. But the other one, it's funny because it seems that so many of the political issues that we're disagreeing on right now, they all revolve around sex.
Yes.
And it's funny you bring up abortion because I was just listening to Jordan Peterson, and he had the chance to talk to some political figures, especially some Democrats. And he was saying that by the time that we've got into the conversation of abortion, we're having the wrong conversation because we've made so many mistakes that's led up to this point.
That's right.
And he points out that one of the things that conservatives and liberals are disagreeing on right now is conservatives tend to be very conservative about sex. They tend to say be very careful about it and try to keep it in certain confines. And the liberals seem to have two very contradictory positions right now. On the one hand, they've said this whole time that, you can do whatever you want with sex, stay out of my bedroom. Sex it's just a physical act. We can do whatever we want with it and all these different things. And at the same time, they seem to be suggesting that sex is so dangerous that you need permission just to hold someone's hand. And even certain college campuses, they have apps now where you have to have affirmative consent all the way. And so what do you think's happening there?
Well, I wrote an article probably 2 years ago. It's on our website called LGBTQ Contradictions, because it's really a contradictory movement. And the left, 10 minutes ago, were telling us we're born this way. Now they're saying, you can go to bed as a man and wake up as a woman, right? I mean,
yeah.
Look, you can't have it both ways. And I like to ask people, sometimes people will come to me and say, well, there's no evidence for God. And I want to ask them, well, before we get to the God question, is there any evidence for gender? And if they say no, I say, look, I can't help you with the God question then. If you're not going to be able to recognize your own anatomy, you're never going to recognize an invisible being who created and sustains everything that exists. Because your anatomy is obvious in front of you. Obviously, there are genetic differences. And in fact, if there weren't genetic differences, nobody would be trying to change from a man to a woman or a woman to a man. There'd be everyone was the same. If there was no difference, there wouldn't be anything known as transgenderism or same-sex marriage. It all presupposes the binary sexual reality that is baked into reality. So, and then there's another article, I think, on our website called The Religion of Sex. And I think there's a new religion in our country, and it is a religion of sex. Because look, if there is no God, what else is there? What else do we have? We're just out here to satisfy our glands, basically, because there's no ultimate meaning to life. So I understand why people who don't trust in God or don't think God exists would make this their top priority then. And so I think to them it is a religion. It is in the sense that it's their ultimate priority. When I talk about religion, I mean, what is your ultimate priority? What is the thing that you worship, the thing you put at the top of your priority list? And for many people today, it's sex and relationships.